So in this video, we're going to talk about how to factor trinomials where a is 1. So remember, standard form of a quadratic looks like ax squared plus bx plus c. So today we're going to be working on factoring trinomials where a is 1, so they're going to look like this, x squared plus bx plus c. Because remember, we usually don't write coefficients of 1 in algebra. So we're going to work on factoring trinomials, and what that means is that we're going to be figuring out the expressions that can be multiplied together to form the original trinomial. So for example, the factors of x squared plus 5x plus 6 are x plus 2 and x plus 3. That's the same thing as saying that x plus 2 times x plus 3 is equal to x squared plus 5x plus 6. And you can actually verify that that is in fact true. So what are we going to do to find factor pairs? So what you're going to do is you're going to look for two numbers that will add to b, which is the coefficient of the x term, but they need to multiply to c, which is the constant term. So for that example, x squared plus 5x plus 6, that's how we came up with 2 and 3. Because 2 plus 3 equals 5, and 2 times 3 equals 6. Figuring out the signs of the factors is going to be very important. So I've created this flow chart here that will hopefully help you out with that process. So it's all going to depend on the sign of C and the sign of B. If C is positive, both our factors will have the same sign, so they'll either both be positive or both be negative. So if B is positive, both factors will be positive, and if B is negative, both factors will be negative. On the other hand, if C is negative, both factors will have the opposite sign. So you'll have a positive and a negative. And the reason for that is because the only way to multiply two numbers together and get a negative number is if those two numbers have opposite signs. So if B is positive, then what's going to happen is the bigger factor is going to be positive. On the other hand, if B is negative, then the bigger factor will be negative. So here are our steps. We're going to start off by making sure our trinomial is in standard form, and then you're going to factor out a GCF if you can. Then we'll determine the factors of C, and then based on the signs of B and C, we're going to adjust the signs of the factors. Then we'll determine the factor pair that adds up to B, and we'll write the final trinomial in factored form. Remember to include a GCF if you found one. So let's try factoring x squared plus 7x plus 12. So what we're going to do is we're going to first identify the values of B and C. So this means that we're going to be looking at factors of 12 that add up to 7. Okay, so in this case, our C is positive. So that means our factors will both have the same sign. B is also positive, so that means both of our factors will be positive. So let's list out all the factors of 12. Well, the factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. If you need help with this step, please refer to that factor pairs chart I have in the study guides. So let's go ahead now and add up all our factors because we don't need to change the signs because all the signs are positive. So we have the first sum, which is 13, and then 2 plus 6 is 8, 3 plus 4 is 7, so that's going to be the pair that works. So we can write this now in factored form as x plus 3 times x plus 4. So now let's try this example. So we have x squared plus x minus 30. Remember that if we don't have a coefficient written for a term, that means that coefficient is 1. So in this case, B is 1 and C is negative 30. So we're looking for factors of negative 30 that are going to add up to 1. Well, in this case, our C is negative. Okay, so our factors will have opposite sign. B is positive, so that means our bigger factor is going to be positive. So let's go ahead and just list out the factors of 30. So we have 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, and 5 and 6. So we need to correct this list with the signs. So we're going to go ahead and leave all the bigger factors as positive and make all the smaller factors negative. So now let's go ahead and add up these factors. So we have negative 1 plus 30, which is 29, negative 2 plus 15, which is 13, negative 3 plus 10 is 7, negative 5 plus 6 is 1, so that's going to be the correct pair. So we can write this in factored form as x minus 5 times x plus 6. So now you can go ahead and pause the video and try doing this example on your own. So in this case, notice that our value of B is plus 3 and our value of C is negative 28. So we're going to be looking for two factors of negative 28 that are going to add to 3. In this case, our C is negative, so our factors will have opposite sign. Since b is positive, our bigger factor will be positive. So I made a list of all the factors of 28, which are 1 and 28, 2 and 14, and 4 and 7, and then I made all the smaller factors negative. When I added them together, the correct combination was negative 4 and 7, so this factors into x minus 4 times x plus 7. So I just want to also remind you to always be on the lookout for a GCF. Remember that a GCF is an expression that will evenly divide all the terms in the expression, and if you just get in the habit of factoring on a GCF, it's going to help you simplify a lot of these problems. So for example, here, instead of starting to try to factor 3x squared plus 27x plus 42, I can just divide that 3 out of every term and rewrite this as 3 times x squared plus 9x plus 13. So another thing I want to remind you of is a common mistake that I see when I'm grading some assignments. A lot of people will forget to include the GCF in your final answer, and it actually completely changes the meaning of your answer if you don't include the GCF. So for example, you can see here, this person has gone through and they've correctly found the GCF. They've done all the factoring correctly, but then when they wrote the final answer, they didn't include the GCF. So let's try this example now. Let's factor 4x squared minus 8x minus 140. Well, notice in this case, I do have a GCF. My GCF will be 4, and I can go ahead and divide that out of all of my terms. So I have 4x squared over 4 minus 8x over 4 minus 140 over 4. Okay, so if I divide that out, I have 4 times 4x squared over 4 is going to be x squared, minus 8x over 4 is going to be minus 2x, and then minus 140 over 4 is going to be 35. Okay, so my value of b is negative 2. My value of c is minus 35. So I need factors of negative 35 that are going to add up to negative 2. In this case, my c is negative. So my factors will have the opposite sign. Well, notice that my b is negative. So actually, my negative factor is going to be the bigger one, and my smaller factor is going to be positive. So let's list out the factors of 35. They're 1 and 35. And then we have 5 and 7. So let's make all the bigger factors negative and find all our sums. So 1 plus negative 35 is negative 34. 5 plus negative 7 is negative 2. So that's going to give us 4. Remember, I did include the GCF in my final answer. And then times x plus 5 times x minus 7. Okay, so that's how you factor that expression. So when factoring trinomials, first make sure that the trinomial is in standard form. X squared plus bx plus c. Based on the values of b and c, you can determine the factors of the trinomial when a is equal to 1.